Okay, we're good to go, Board Member Cole.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Glad to see each of you here, and certainly open to and excited about welcoming the community. With that in mind, let's do a call to order.
Board Member Brown,
I'm here.
Chair Cole,
Present.
Mr. Green,
Here.
Ms. Johnson,
Here.
Mr. Jordan,
Here.
Mr. Miller,
Here.
and Board Member Ragland.
Here.
All
We
right.
have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, or thank you, Mr. Treasurer. It is one of those days.
I got promoted.
But with that in mind, again, welcome to today's June 9th Finance and Appropriations Committee. We have a fairly robust agenda today, and we'll walk right through that after we do an approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move it.
All right, it's moved. We got a second?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Mr. Ragland, second. Mr. Treasurer?
Chair Cole,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Jordan,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Board Member Ragland,
Yes.
Board Member Brown.
Yes.
That motion carried.
Awesome. Okay. Today's agenda is going to first be the presentation of our financial report. We'll then go into a discussion around and presentation, or just a discussion around our fund transfer, specifically for WCBE. In addition to that, we'll talk about the federal ESSER funding, which is quite interesting. I've been a part of this FRN policy piece today with NSBA, so this should be very interesting. And then permanent improvement levy. So we can go ahead and kick it off right now, Mr. Treasurer.
All right. Thank you very much. This is the monthly financial report for May. I'll present this to you and the Finance Committee today, and then it will go to the board next Tuesday at their regular meeting on June 15th. Through the month of May, our revenues, the year-to-date variance declined this month to about 31 million above plan, or 3.4%. And that was down from, we were about 38 million over plan last month, or 4.3%. You'll see that it has solely to do with revenue that came in, or the plan that caught up with itself for the rollback on homestead exemption payment from the state. Year-to-date variance on expenditures increased. In other words, we went further under plan to 73.3 million, or 8% under plan. And last month, that was about 64.8 million, or 8.9% under plan. Our cash balance variance has increased a couple of $1 million to 105 million above plan through May. And it stands now at 410 million at the end of the month. Just a picture of how our cash balances are running. As you can see, they're mirroring pretty much the pattern of previous years, but clearly running above those numbers that we saw last year. Highlights for the month in terms of revenue. State funding is up year to date by 25 million. If you look at the plan in the report that I give you in the MD&A, you'll see that the final 3 months of the plan kind of tail off based upon some of the historical behavior we've had. When in actuality this year, our payments have been pretty level each month, except for a couple of oddball, one-off kind of payments, notably that dividend from the Bureau of Workers' Compensation, and then a catch-up payment when the state of Ohio restored our at least part of the cut for this fiscal year. But other than that, it's really been a very even amount month to month. But the plan, based upon some historical experience, was a little bit more jagged or irregular. So anyway, the plan for the next 3 months kind of tail, or for these last 3 months, April, May, and June, tail off a bit, so we get those over plan variances. But again, that's simply because of what the plan was doing based upon historical experiences. Property tax allocation is now essentially on plan. We're about $859,000 under plan. That's because the relationship between actual and plan worked itself out. The plan had this payment coming in over, I think it was 3 months, when in fact we get one payment. That's actually, I think I mentioned before, I should have gone back to the plan and made it as a bullet, just pick a month that it would come in. I didn't, it was still spread out. So it's caught up with itself. It should finish the year right at this level. So we're spot on there in terms of the property tax allocation from the state. Since that property tax allocation from the state is really part of real estate collections, I add the two of them together to see how well we do in planning or projecting for revenue that received through property taxes. And so when I add them together, you can see the variance is about $5.5 million or 1% variance. So we're very much spot on. And I believe I share in the MD&A a graph that plots the variance month to month, and all of that variance pretty much came in that first half settlement earlier than the year. Our bar chart for the major revenue categories: property taxes, state aid, and everything else. Property taxes unchanged from the previous month. State aid continues to show that favorable variance I mentioned, and all other revenues now has pretty much, it looks like it's spot on plan. But when we break it down into the pieces that make that up, you'll see that property tax allocation has come right on plan for this month, and that all other revenues are really offset. This favorable variance here is offset a bit by the unfavorable variance of other financing sources. So we come out in this overall category even, but you can see it varies a little bit in a couple of these categories. Again, this is a picture of the state aid. This is the part of the plan trailing off in these 3 months that I mentioned, but you can see overall the black line, except for this spike and this spike, it's been pretty much even month to month. So that's just a graphical representation of that for you. Our heat map, this month, heat indicators in terms of dollar amount are mainly on plan. The percentages on a few of them are very unfavorable, but that's because of the small dollar amount that represents on a monthly basis a large variance in terms of percentage. And I spoke with you before about how those numbers work. But on a year-to-date basis, the property tax allocation has now changed to on plan, although it is percentage-wise just slightly unfavorable because it's under plan, but we're talking about $850,000 here. Other financing sources, all of those were unchanged in terms of year-to-date dollar variance, but there was a slight deterioration in total other financing sources line to very unfavorable from unfavorable last month. Total revenue and other financing sources, line 2.080, the last line there is unchanged from last month, standing at very favorable for the dollar variance, moderately favorable in terms of the percent variance. Moving on to expenditures, a year to date, personnel increased 2.3 million to 28.4 million under plan year to date. Salaries and wages this month were pretty much spot on, but fringe benefits were 2.2 million under plan for the month, representing the vast majority, if not almost all, of that personnel variance. Purchase services, another 2.8 million under plan this month. Year to date, same categories: professional technical services, property services, electricity, and tuition to other districts are top the year-to-date variances, and they range from 3.3 million to 5.7 million under plan each. Charter, under plan this month by about 373,000. And there's 6 million under plan year to date. Supplies, materials, and capital outlay under plan again this month, 226,000 and 232,000 respectively. Again, for purchase services, supplies, materials, capital outlay, all those non-personnel lines, because we put in the plan the budgeted amount, and we typically don't spend what is budgeted, those under plan variances are expected. And as you know, I changed that methodology for the 5-year forecast to use a historical percent of plan or percent of budget expended to put in the forecast, so it represents more of a true cash flow document. Graphically here, you can see personnel running under, charter slightly under, and all other expenditures under plan. Breaking out the all other expenditures, you see the purchase services lead the pack there in terms of dollar amount and percentage. And on the heat map, the month to date map turned green this month from last month, with it being moderately favorable to very favorable in many categories. Year to date, there was an improvement in other financing uses, line 5.040. It changed to very favorable on a percentage from moderately favorable last month. Total expenditures are this heat map for total expenditures, the last line there, is unchanged from last month. Comparing to prior year at this point in time, you can see property tax allocation since it dropped to about 30,000 less than last year, and that's really the only significant change. There was a timing difference there of when we received it last year versus this year, so very much spot on. The property tax variance all comes in what we recorded in line 1.01. You can see there we're up about 3.7% over last year. State aid continues to run ahead of last year, interestingly enough, so pretty much because of those one-off payments as well as the restoration of the cut. Nothing else is really noticeable on that page. When we get to expenditures, now that 3-pay month issue has worked its way out, we had 3-pay last month, but last year the 3-pay month was in April this year, but last year was May, so it kind of threw off the April numbers. Looked like we were running way ahead of last year, but now that we've gotten through that 3-pay, from a history perspective, it's caught up with itself, and you can see we're back to being actually behind where we were last year this time in personnel, both personal services, salaries and wages, and benefits. The other categories have the same relationship, with purchase services running behind and the other categories in non-personnel running ahead of last year. You can see advances out again. We've been needing to provide some cash flow assistance to WCBE and Latchkey Fund, which we'll talk about later. And then as far as ending cash balance is concerned, compared to last year, we are up about $82 million. That's a summary of the May report. Revenues continue to run above plan. We will end the year above plan, certainly, and expenditures down about 8% year to date, and we expect to finish at that level or better by the end of the year. Again, building a cash balance towards the end of the year. We'll remind you that we will be doing that $80 million transfer for providing that seed money for the bus purchase or the student transportation fleet replacement plan. And so that will show up as an expenditure. So expenditures will likely end the year pretty much right on target. And that will cut into that building of a cash balance. So all in all, I think a very good picture. And, we're going to end the year in pretty good shape here. So that's it for this report. I'd be glad to answer any questions. I don't know if there's any potential questions about where we are on state funding. We could talk about that if you'd like. But other than that, that concludes my report, Chair Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Are there any questions for Treasurer Bahort? Awesome, awesome. Again, thank you for just showing good stewardship on the part of this district and our administration in terms of the leadership that and how we're trying to wisely use these dollars to our advantage so that we can carry ourselves forward in other ways. So thank you for that. We'll move on to fund transfer.
Yes, the fund transfer, this is a discussion that at the end of the year, there are some funds that need cash flow assistance on a more permanent basis. We'll be talking about the Latchkey program and WCBE. Mr. Gooding may wish to join into the conversation because he's done a lot of these calculations. And let me just say this, I put this agenda item on there and we call it fund transfer, but I think Mr. Gooding can explain to you that while one's going to be a transfer, WCBE, the Latchkey will actually be in advance, and he'll explain that to you here in just a minute. But let me share with you some numbers, if I can, give you a little historical perspective. Hopefully you see my PDF of the Latchkey program. Is that correct? Did I share appropriately? Okay, good.
Yes.
This is the Latchkey program over the last 3 years historically, and this year through just a day or two ago when I ran these numbers. You can see here in FY20, because of the pandemic, and the fact that we kept staff engaged without any real revenue source. At that point, we needed to do a transfer in of 148,000 to bring them, into the black. This shows your expenditures. This is all attached in board docs, and you can see here the ending balance. At that point in time, it was almost $1.6 million. And Scott, if you want to talk about, we'll just talk about this fund first, about the concept of an advance versus a transfer and where you think this number might end up by the end of the year. It'd certainly be probably larger than this, but give us some idea of that.
Okay, yeah, I will do. And just point of clarification, just so everybody's aware, the Latchkey is just another way for us to, is what we call our before and after school care programs that we do in our schools. So that's the program we have, as Stan had mentioned, in FY20. That 148,000 was the first of the pandemic, of the COVID closure that happened. We looked at the costs for this by continuing to pay the staff in those programs. Obviously, the fees that we collect for that, the revenue was gone. So we were projecting worst case scenario if COVID lasted the whole year and there was no revenue for that program whatsoever, that we would have been anticipating a deficit just over $2 million. So the document that Stan had on the screen here showed just over 1.5. So obviously we still have expenses. We still have one more payroll for the month of June to post, so 1.6. So we're going to be between this 1.6 and that 2 million that we looked at. The concept that we're talking about in terms of advancing money, it's an accounting term that we're going to advance funds from the general fund to the Latchkey program at June 30th. And then July 1st into the new fiscal year, we would return those funds back to the general fund. The reason we're looking to do that is loss of revenue is one of the things that we can look at, a use of the ESSER funds that we've received from the federal government. So we're looking at that to, instead of this being a cost to the general fund on an ongoing basis, that we would be able to look at that and charge that lost revenue off to the ESSER funds that we would do. The timing of that is we're probably going to charge that off during FY22, which will take effect, which starts on July 1st, but we can go back to March of 2020 when the pandemic started and charge off those expenses. So we're just trying to line that up with the FY22 budget year. So that's the Latchkey piece. I mean, we could transfer those funds, but once we've transferred it, the money's gone. It sits in the other fund unless there's another action by the board to move those back. So we're thinking the advance is the right way to go for this particular fund.
Are there any questions for Mr. Gooding?
Yes,
Everyone
sir.
understands pretty much. Oh, go ahead. You're on mute. Go ahead.
Please excuse me, Mr. Chairman. I did have a question for Mr. Gooding regarding FY22 latchkey program. Is the administration preparing or do we have any numbers that suggest that we may need to expand our latchkey services? I'm thinking of this from every indication. There have been a number of child care and daycare facilities that otherwise serve as latchkey functions that have closed during the pandemic. There seems to be some unreadiness around whether or not those institutions will be able to open back up in time enough for us to return back to in-person learning fully. And I'm wondering if the administration has determined whether or not an expansion of our latchkey program, utilizing, at least for the short term, utilizing some of the monies that we have available would be prudent now, understanding that there may not be a return of what I would consider to be the mom and pop shops in time enough, and other families may be looking to the district to provide that function for them more so this year than they have in the past. Have you all had those types of discussions, and what has materialized from them, if you have?
So, yeah, thank you, Board Member Ragland. I know that the early childhood program has had some conversations about that. I don't know if they've landed on a final decision about that. So what we'll need to do is go back and check with the program side and Dr. Kelly Rivers and her team to see where they are, because I know they're running through a lot of different scenarios to account for exactly the same things you're talking about, that when all these kids are back, they're going to need a place to go. Do we have the staff to accommodate it? Do we have the physical space to accommodate it? All those things that we need to look at and incorporate. So we'll obviously need to loop back with the program side to get those answers for you.
If possible, thank you so much for that. If possible, could you speak to the superintendent about maybe reporting that information out to us at Tuesday's meeting? If this is a time where the Board of Education needs to start doing some work outside of the district to rally some of our community partners, I think it'd be better for us to have that information in June as opposed to later on in the year, knowing that we're going to kind of have a little bit of a dead period in July. It'd be interesting to know that information, and if the superintendent or maybe even Mr. Treasurer would want to use his opportunity for a report at Tuesday's board meeting, that might be very helpful to us. But thank you, sir. Thank you for that information. That concludes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Board Member Ragland. Are there any other additional questions? And
maybe just a point of clarification that there isn't anything that the committee needs to do with either this or the WCBE advanced transfer. We're just kind of talking through this just so there's a projection so the committee's aware that this is going to happen. We will take the final numbers to the board for approval on Tuesday, June 29th at that meeting. And that's when we'll ask the board for the actual advance, the advance for the latchkey and transfer for WCBE.
Thank you for that clarification. All right, moving on to WCBE, if there aren't any additional questions.
So here's same information for WCBE, the financial information. You can see the two transfers, the one in FY19 back when some of the financial issues that came up, and then last year about 768,000 to keep them in the black. And then at the time I ran this report, and this gives you a good idea of where they are on revenue side. You can see that this particular line has diminished over time. And then I'm sorry, there you go. Don't want to make anybody seasick. The projected ending balances, they ended back here in 18, a little over $500,000. It's declined even with the two, we had to cover them with those two transfers, and pretty much broke even here at the end of 20. So far, about $500,000 in the red, and then I'll let Scott speak to what he believes that projection would be for the end of the year, knowing that we put in 750,000 in the forecast.
Yeah, that's correct. So, yeah, 750,000, as Stan said, is what we put in the 5-year forecast. The projections that we have at this time is better than that. I mean, it's not great, but it's not in excess of the 750,000. So we're looking right now just under 695,000 that we'll need to transfer from the general fund to the WCBE program, and that would again will come to the board on June 29th.
Are there any questions at this point in time? I'm not sure, Board Member Brown or Ragland, anyone else?
Yeah, I would like to know, and I'm not sure how you all are preparing to present this information to the board on Tuesday, but if there can be a final what it is that we're going to ultimately do with the station, I would like to couple that information with any type of decision that would go to the board for a transfer of funds. I think we've kind of kicked this around for quite some time, and we've seen variations of plans and have been included in some other plans. But I think it's time that we, whatever we're going to do, let's tie a bow around this before we, commit ourselves to moving even more resources towards the continuation of the station. I would just hope that that information will be included at Tuesday's meeting. Mr. Gooding, I'm not sure if that goes to you or whomever, but just as a matter of courtesy to the board, I don't want to talk anymore about transferring funds unless we know for certain what's going to happen, at least in the short term for this. And that's my comment. I'm sorry that's not in the form of a question, Mr. Chairman, but that's just my comment around WCBE. Thank you.
And James, thank you, because I completely agree with what you said. I do want to hear more, and I also have the question that isn't going to be answerable today, but perhaps when this is all presented, and that is, we've put in a lot of money. What have we received for the school district or for our students for that money?
I know that question, as you just stated, is more appropriate for the board meeting itself.
Sure.
Initially, at least in this initial terms right now, for the sake of this committee, this is merely just a $5,000 foot overview, if you will, of what this is going to look like in terms of requests to the Board of Education, and what that comprises. So yeah.
And I fully understand that, and I know James does as well. But I guess it's one way of helping communicate what we want to see when this is presented, and the other, at least for me, is that I can't help myself on this.
Well, I appreciate that, because Board Member Brown and Board Member Ragland, knowing that helps then frame, not so much for us, but for others. We'll communicate this to others about your expectations that while we're presenting just the financial side, which seems fairly straightforward from our perspective. You run the numbers. We need to advance some dollars to keep the fund in the black at the year end, and in this particular case, we need to transfer these dollars on a permanent basis to keep that program afloat. What you're asking is, we want to see where is this headed if we're going to continue to do this, and we'll convey that, and I can't speak for that side of the shop here, but we'll share that, and in fact, to full disclosure, I mentioned to them that we're bringing this up. I intended it to be just the financial discussion, as you all have just as noted, and so I did not ask them to come prepared for that at all. So that's not for lack of interest on their part. It was my direction that we just wanted to talk about the dollars and cents, but we will convey that to those involved with WCBE. So thank you for that. That helps a lot. And I appreciate knowing that, and they will appreciate knowing that on Wednesday before the Tuesday board meeting, rather than Monday before the Tuesday, or worse yet, at the board meeting. So we thank you for the advance notice. So we appreciate it.
All right, as they should be prepared to provide that anyway. But moving on, if there aren't any other questions, and I'm looking. Okay, if we can move on, then we'll go to the elementary and secondary school emergency relief funding.
Yeah, this is really just information for you. You know, we've been talking about this federal funding. Not only is the Finance Committee and the board very interested on the how much and where is it going question, rest assured that we've already been receiving requests from several agencies about, we want to know how you're spending the money. So reporting out on this is something that we expected. I believe you've heard, and if not seen, that we have a dashboard on our website with some FAQs and some numbers and explanations about the ESSER funds. Also requesting community feedback on where they believe we might want to invest those funds. But when this first came up with the Finance Committee, I believe there was a desire expressed that you receive quarterly updates of some fashion about where we're going. And this is just a layout for you at this meeting, what I think the schedule should be in terms of timeliness. The quarterly meetings would be coming up here September, December, and then March and June of 22. Those dates for 22 assume that we will continue to meet on the same Wednesday in between the first and third Mondays or Tuesdays in between those board meetings in 22. But just to let you know, that's what we're going to do. The team's ready to present those, but you know, kind of not real time, but very up-to-date information is always available on the website. So that's just an informational piece, and I hope that quarterly schedule meets with everybody. It allows us to prepare adequately, really for the first one, the September one, so that we get through the summer and then get ready to meet this schedule. So that's all that was, Chair Cole.
Thank you for that. So just as a quick refresher, if you would provide us, Ohio is looking at receiving about what, 4.4 billion in
Oh my goodness.
proceeds.
Is Dr. Roush here?
That is correct. That is correct. About 4.4 billion, give or take a few million.
There you go. And we're looking at maybe an appropriation of about a little bit over $2,600 per student in Ohio with use of these funds. So we're looking at a per pupil basis. Where are we with costs?
I've not looked at it at a per pupil basis. I know that I think we're slated and I'm sure our budget director can correct me, around $294 million, I think, in ESSER 3 funds for the district. The state gets to keep 10% under federal law, so it'll maintain that. So that's about 400 and some million the state will have. There are some limitations on how it can expend those funds under ESSER 3. Keep in mind that they also have similar provisions under both ESSER 1 and ESSER 2.
Okay.
I don't have it on a per pupil basis. I've done the math on that.
No, I looked at a source that shows it at $2,623.84. This is learningpolicyinstitute.org that cites that number. But thank you for that quick, brief update. I want to make sure that those on this panel and also in the committee and those who are watching are aware of where these dollars are going, that so much amount of this money has to go to particular purposes that are student-centered, that are systems-centered, that are classroom-centered. So thank you for that.
Happy to help.
Thank you for bailing me out, Dr. Roush. The next item on the agenda, as long as I don't hear any other questions about ESSER funds, I wanted to provide the committee what I call some summer reading materials. As you know, this committee will be considering and hearing information on permanent improvement levy needs, life cycle replacement kinds of projects. Very similar to a subset of that is that school transportation fleet replacement plan. And so I included on board docs, and I will email to all of you after this meeting so that you have it, some material from last March and April's millage committee meetings, some of which some of you participated in them, but this PDF is about 60 some pages long. It comes from the April 27th meeting, and it includes some public school funding overview, how property taxes work and how they're levied and collected and impacts of levy. It reviews the district's budget and forecasting process and the timing. It frames the discussion for the PI levy in terms of funding sources, and then also my infamous buckets of spending. Let me widen that out a little bit for you, but you can see the buckets that I have, the FMP and the life cycle replacement and general operations. So it begins to lay out for you just an overview and a framework for looking at school funding. We talk about the FMP, a facilities master plan, what it is, what its purpose is, and some of the history behind that. We get into life cycle replacement, similar to the discussion I had about the student transportation replacement plan, but goes into some other examples, one of which is Operation Fix-It, that $125 million 2016 bond issue was passed, and gives a little update on some of those activities. And then it gets down into what at that time was a recommendation to that millage committee in terms of what the needs are. And so as we get into this in the fall and the ensuing months, we'll be updating this, and you'll see additional information, with some current discussion about what's going on in the district. So I will make sure you all have a copy of that via email. And as I said, I'll be expecting a 2-page book report from each of you when we return in August. But that's what I have for you on that.
Are there any questions at this point about this information and data? And I most assuredly encourage each and every one of you to take a look at this information, kind of familiarize yourself with it. I think that the millage committee that convened almost now, 2 years ago? Almost.
No, we convened right as COVID hit.
Right as it hit. Okay, so now about 1.5 years ago.
Yeah. We went totally virtual.
Yep. So with that in mind, about 1.5 years ago, where we convened these meetings to discuss and get information on community appetite and board appetite for a bond and or levy issue and a permanent improvement issue. At the end of the day, what we want to be able to do, because their information is still carried on accurately to this day, in terms of aspirations for the district, in terms of what the board has communicated the district needs, and we're further developing that through the FMP process, the facilities master plan. But I just wanted to make sure that folks look at that information and provide feedback as quickly as you can by August. But if there aren't any questions, we can move on to our final and important segment as well.
The last item on the agenda is a discussion about our meeting format. Things are being relaxed. We're starting to return to normal. And I posed some questions to our legal counsel that might help guide the discussion. Because I anticipate that we will return to in-person meetings come August. One of the questions I asked was, do we have now, or will we have in the future, the option to permit remote attendance by the actual members of the committee? And I asked that in light of, is a committee different than the board? And the answer to that was no. That the revised code section that applies to this treats committees the same as the board. because this committee is considered a public body. So we're subject to the same rules and regulations. We notice the meetings. Obviously here, we live stream them, make them public, and provide for that public access. The other question I posed was, can staff, not members of the committee, but can staff participate virtually? The initial thought there is yes, we could provide a mechanism for staff. Say, for instance, Mr. Gooding or Dr. Roush might participate virtually, and we've talked about running both, not only streaming this, doing it in person, but also conducting it as a Zoom meeting as well, for staff members to participate. And then the last question was whether or not committee members could vote virtually if there was a quorum of in-person members. So if you've got enough members, if 4 members show up, can 1 or 2 of the other members be virtual and vote? And the answer to that is no. In order to vote, you have to be present. You can certainly probably listen in and participate in the discussion, but you would not be able to vote virtually. I believe the authority that was granted expires here, I want to say the end of June, perhaps. And again, I've got to raise my hand to Dr. Roush, but I believe that expires here at the end of June. That allowed us to meet as a public body remotely. And so the plan would be, unless this committee wants somehow to design something different, would be in August for our August meeting. We would meet down at the 3700 South High facility, the brand new facility. There is a room there that the board has been using for their hybrid meetings to have some of the members there in person. And communications, Mr. Wortman is on this meeting and may want to speak to all that they've done there to make really what is an excellent meeting facility for broadcasting the meeting, for recording the meeting, for facilitating, social distancing, should we so choose, and also to provide for, Zoom capabilities. So we'll have, I think, all the formats covered in that regard, that we can be remote. And some of you, as long as we have a quorum and can hold the meeting, if some of you can't make it for one reason or another, you will be able to have you join in via Zoom. So I think we're trying to meet all the needs and touch all the bases. So that's what I have for you on that. If there's questions or if Mr. Wortman would like to add anything, I'll leave it up to you folks.
Anyone? Mr. Ragland?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for that, Mr. Bohoric. I do want to voice my support for the meeting space at 3700. I believe our communications and administration team do a very good job of making certain that is a highly sanitized environment. We have complete shields around every seating area. Each area is properly distanced. The number of individuals inside of those rooms is properly controlled, and then the materials that we use in order to conduct the meetings are controlled as well. And so I think they do an exceptional job, and I've always felt safe in participating in person whenever we've been tasked to do so for our general board meetings. And so understanding that we're going to be returning to that with all of our committees, I just want to give my vote of confidence for the way that we've done things, and hopefully hopefully the rest of this committee will be able to address any of their specific needs with our communications department. But they do an excellent job of keeping everyone safe and distanced down at 3700. So thank you for that, Mr. Chairman.
Quite welcome and concur. Mr. Brown?
Thank you. And I agree with everything that's been said. I just have one further question, and I guess it would apply both for the committee and for the board and for all of our committees. And I think it was answered, but not directly. That is, assuming that we have a quorum present and that the body, committee, or board can proceed. Can a committee member or board member join remotely and participate in the discussion, but obviously not be able to vote.
Yes.
I think the answer to that is yes, and I do recall previous FAC meetings where we had a member do that, and I believe we've had some board discussions that way as well. Not as many as the FAC, but and it was difficult because it was done using a telephone, a speakerphone, and so that communication was difficult. But now with the combination, if we, and I believe, if I'm right, Mr. Wortman, I gave him the opportunity to jump in. I didn't see him jump in, but I believe if we use Zoom, that ability to communicate two-way will be enhanced and be easier to do. But they will not be able to vote. That is correct.
All right. Are there any additional questions, concerns from other committee members? I don't see anything. I don't see a raise of hand or a chat. Okay. All right. I thank you so much for, again, attending our June FAC. I look forward to the opportunity of getting to see you all in August. Please have a safe, warm, happy, joyful summer. I look forward to continuing our work, and please feel free to stay in contact with myself or Mr. Bohoric should any other issues or concerns, questions arise. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
I move to
I heard Mr. Jordan
Yep.
Second.
and Ms. Johnson with the second. And before I call roll, let me thank all of you for participating in these meetings in the Zoom format. One thing I do like about it is I can see you all at the same time. You know, when we're sitting around the table, I have to kind of lean one way or the other, and I don't get to see your expressions and kind of get some audience feedback. So I appreciate your continued support of this committee, coming to these meetings, making sure we have a quorum, and actively participating. Quite frankly, it's a favorite meeting of mine out of all the meetings I have to go to, and I've enjoyed it. Be great to see you all in person, but the Zoom has been, I think we've pulled this off swimmingly, as they say. So thank you all for that. And with that, if it's okay, Mr. Chair, I will call the roll.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Green,
yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Jordan,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Board Member Ragland,
Yes.
Board Member Brown,
Yes.
and Chair Cole.
Yes.
That motion carried.
All right, everyone, have a wonderful summer. We look forward to seeing you guys live and in person in August. I'll be checking in with you guys, over the next month or so anyway, just to see how you all are doing and just kind of survey. But thank you, and talk to you soon.
Thank you all.
Bye. Good night. Take care.